Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Future of Health Tech Breakout. We are so glad to have you all here joining us, and we are excited and really grateful for StartOut for hosting what has been a really rich day of sessions. So hopefully you all have been able to join the other sessions, and what we're going to be focused on now is health tech. And so by way of preamble, and then we'll move into introductions. During times of pandemic, nobody really needs a lecture on the importance of health tech. And if you were at the opening session, Arlen Hamilton noted healthcare companies at the top of the list for LGBTQ founded companies. And as is true for many marginalized communities, we are really at the forefront of understanding how the status quo for healthcare is really wholly inadequate and ripe for disruption. In 2017, Forbes valued the digital health industry at 25 billion globally, and they believe that number will skyrocket to nearly 380 billion by 2024. Since then, we've seen the landscape really be impacted by a lot of major events: COVID-19, an incredibly competitive funding landscape, an economic downturn, and in the US, a shifting regulatory and political environment that creates both unique challenges and opportunities for the LGBTQ plus community in particular. So we're excited here to be discussing emerging trends in healthcare and what is specifically evolving by way of LGBTQ plus digital health innovation. In terms of introductions, my name is Jess Friesen. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Director of Member Success at Plume. I would say I have one of the best jobs in the world. I work with an amazing team of trans and non-binary care coordinators who deliver thoughtful, accessible, and expert care to over 650 patients a day via omni-channel telehealth. Plume is one of the largest providers of trans healthcare in the country, and we're on a mission to transform healthcare for every trans life. So we're 3 years into our evolution, and since our founding, we've served over 15,000 patients with life-saving, gender-affirming care. I am really honored to be joined by 3 incredible speakers today to have what we hope will be a thought-provoking and helpful conversation for you all about healthcare tech. Our panelists have a variety of experiences, from early-stage startups to large public companies, to working with several nonprofits in this space, as well as working with public hospitals. So we're really looking forward to what we hope will be an expansive conversation. Knowing what a diverse audience we have here today, we want to make sure we're talking about what's relevant to you. So while we do our introductions, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to hear why you joined today's session, what you hope to get out of it. And as we share our own experiences, we want to gear our thoughts to you. So without any further ado, I will let each of our guests introduce themselves, starting with Jessica. Could you share your name, pronouns, and some about your background?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Jessica Thurmond, she, her. I am the co-founder and co-CEO of Othello Health. We are the first biometric-anchored virtual coach for patients with breast and gynecologic cancer, with a keen focus around the social determinants of health. As this relates to the LGBT community, I am an LGBT founder. My lovely wife, Kelly, is back home in Nashville. She is a teacher. And really grateful to be here and kind of talk about the intersection of all of risk assessment, social determinants of health as it relates to our community and how we can better educate other communities about our needs in the healthcare industry. Great to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christina. My pronouns are she and her. I am a product leader, so I'm currently the head of product for partnerships and corporate wellness at Peloton. I also serve as the vice chair of the board for InReach, which is an LGBTQ nonprofit that seeks to connect LGBTQ people fleeing persecution and seeking services with service providers who we independently verify and vet. And I also volunteer with the Trevor Project as a crisis counselor. And I'm usually based in San Francisco. I'm really glad to be here today.
So now my turn. I'm Judith. I use she and her as pronouns. And I'm based in Barcelona, so almost on the other side of the globe. I'm a molecular biology by training. And then after doing my PhD, I moved to the startup ecosystem there in Barcelona, in Catalonia. Working on a biotech startup first, and nowadays managing the spin-off creation and company evaluation in a network of public hospitals there in Spain. So I'm really glad to be here today to talk about all the new trends that are coming, and also hospitals are pushing all this stuff.
Thank you so much. So where we want to start is at Plume, and I imagine in a lot of your work, we talk a lot about what it means to be patient and community-centered. And so I wanted to kick this discussion off by really thinking about what trends we're seeing emerge that are impacting the people and the communities that we're serving. So I'll open the floor to all of our panelists to share what are you observing in your work as it relates to people's needs and expectations related to their health.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of kick this off. Yeah, I'm in San Francisco. I was just at the Rock Health Innovation Summit, and it was really great to hear a lot of thought leaders and other startup founders talking about, this concept of health equity and personalized healthcare. I think that the understanding that you have to meet patients where they are, meet people where they are, and we all have this intersectionality of different identities that we have. I mean, you may not just be trans, you may also be Black. And you may live in rural America. And I think that one of the big trends that we're seeing, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, and well, not sure fully over, but really seeing that we have to be more flexible, and that we have to have the ability to look at a person as a whole and see that how that affects and impacts their overall patient care. It's been really great to see that it's being discussed more, but it's certainly there's so much more that can be done. I'm excited to hear what everyone else thinks as well.
I join your point. Like after COVID-19, like let's say many things changed, and working directly in the hospitals, you can see there, like most of the trends are going to the digital health and digital therapies as well, but also in relation to prevention and diagnostics, also a kind of digital. So I don't know what you think, Christine, about it, but
yeah, I think like one of the things that we're seeing, and my perspective from more of a like technology solutions provider and like the trends that we're seeing there, on the InReach side, so again, that's the platform for connecting folks in need with vetted services. We can see the trends in our user sessions over time. And we see that during the COVID pandemic, we saw that housing requests and searches for housing that is verified safe went up. And we also saw that there were more requests for mental health services as well. And I think, for example, we could see that this even like the ripple effects of policies that are created at the state and federal government level reflected in the needs of our community as well. So in Florida, we've seen the number of user sessions there actually increase by 10 times due to kind of the changes in the atmosphere and the policies there. And then also within like the Trevor Project, I think we can see that there's mental health needs that are increasing because youth don't have access to the supportive communities outside of their homes that they might have had. So I think COVID has definitely had some pressure on the mental health and the housing aspects.
Yeah, here, if I can add something, is like most of the digital therapies that have been creating during the last year and two are related to mental health, actually. So it's... Yeah.
For us, it's definitely a theme as well. About 25% of our patients that we serve are at risk for depression. And when we start to think about solutions, one things that we've seen is community and peer support groups being really critical to improving outcomes as it relates to mental health. I'm curious, Jessica, in your work related to cancer treatment and serving your patients, how you're seeing community and be able to be helpful in supporting those outcomes as well.
Yeah, I mean, the increasing that like you said, the pandemic was really isolating for people, especially cancer patients, where, they were afraid to go to their appointments. We saw huge inequities, around lack of transportation, like things that are very basic of not even being able to get appointments because, they had a family member who was afraid to drive them, or they were afraid to take public transportation because they were severely immune compromised. And fortunately, a lot of great organizations were able to step in and kind of bridge this gap. But it doesn't change the fact that if you're talking about true health equity, not everyone has access to the same level of care. And we know that all from within the LGBT community. And cancer is indiscriminate. Right? It doesn't care what your sexual identity is or anything. It can hit anybody. And I think that increased intersectionality between, who we are as people and how that relates to giving people the best care to where they have faith in their providers, that's supporting them, that they feel that they have the tools, is really just vital. And it's been encouraging to me in some sense to really see that with this pandemic, that it really has telemedicine. Obviously, Jess, you've seen it with Plume, the capabilities, and I think that in the investor space and in the overall enterprise, of the healthcare ecosystem, people are really starting to understand that this is the way of the future. This is something we have to do to truly be able to support people. And I'm hopeful, at least, that we're going to start to see more support in this area, because I think that a lot of founders and a lot of thought leaders in this industry have had to fight really hard to get to where we are right now. And it's only just the beginning for us to really be able to provide equitable care.
So with that context, how are you seeing technology shape access to care, and what opportunities do you see broadly or specifically for the LGBTQ plus community in that?
Yeah, I think that, an interesting topic that I've thought a lot about is just really the lack of research around, LGBT health. I have a heavy background in clinical trials and pharmaceutical development, and I was really alarmed, when we first started in drug development, that they didn't even differentiate between male and female, man or woman, when it came to their samples. And everyone's just lumped into one category, and everybody's body is built differently and responds differently to different therapeutics. But that's not even been accounted for in the way that we develop our medications. But take that a step further, and we have this kind of conundrum, but also opportunity, where we need more research focused on LGBT needs. And that's hard, right? Because it brings privacy, it brings up concerns about how, especially in this political climate, like, how is my data going to be used? Could it be used against me? But I think this is also an opportunity to reach out to our community and educate them that in order for us to continue moving the needle forward within the healthcare industry, we need that data. We have to have that data. And I think there's ways that we can do it safely, and have greater data analytics that can improve the quality of care and show, government officials, policymakers, the people who force, the system to change, and show them in really tangible terms, numbers of why it is so valuable for us to personalize and individualize care for.
Yeah, and that's something we have to improve from the basic research already. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. It's so difficult to really understand the progress and where we're at if we don't have some of that fundamental data as well. I think one of the other things that I'm seeing in terms of technology shaping access to care is one fundamental trend is around technology as a platform, and it's something that can connect different parts of almost a marketplace or different parts of an ecosystem. And I think that's really where something like InReach or something like a healthcare platform helps, is connecting folks across geographic boundaries, and bringing together the power of something like a bunch of verified services to people who could be anywhere. So our organization there started with bringing asylum seekers who might be needing service providers. You could imagine somebody who was, waiting at the border in Mexico, wanting to find out about a service provider who could provide mental health services once they immigrated in, or something like that kind of use case. And then the other thing we can see is AI and ML, and how that can actually there's an opportunity to help use AI and ML to scale training so that more providers can have cultural competencies to help serve LGBTQ people. I think one example the Trevor Project has talked about really publicly is partnering with Google to use an AI trainer in the training of their crisis counseling. So, like when you go through that process of training, part of it is speaking with somebody who is simulating being a youth in crisis. And we can train many more people more quickly if some of that conversation can be simulated not by a real person, but actually by an AI who will help us to get through more training. And that's like one very specific crisis counseling use case, but we could imagine that there are ways to model difficult conversations or new conversations that a provider might have with an LGBTQ person, and to help them know how to have those conversations and respond.
Yeah, here related to AI, there are many new technologies increasing about diagnostics using this AI. It's a more general stuff, and then another trend that we have seen here during the last years is also virtual reality, and like trying to create a metaverse inside the hospital, like for example for children, that they can go inside the surgery room before they get their surgery done. So it's like they know already what would happen and be more relaxed when they are there. Mm-hmm.
It's just such an expansive field that we'll see really develop and become more mainstream. I also think I'm a huge advocate of devices, anything from Apple Watch, Oura Ring, anything like that for optimization. And I think that we see a lot of these platforms that exist in the towards athletes, and shocking, I'm not a marathon runner. But I do have underlying health conditions, and I do like to know how my body works best. And I think especially in a community that has, like the LGBTQ, that has not always had a lot of autonomy over our own body and over to us, control of our care, that some of these tools to be used to really empower us, with our own data, to be proactive are approaching our care, because we're still very much in a place where you have to be, with people, to be very direct, especially when you're talking about, marginalized communities, even with, trans community and things like that, of truly knowing what's happening, because so often, with the cultural competency tools that are maybe lacking, our concerns may be brushed over. We see that if like I said, cancer is indiscriminate, and because somebody is trans, doctors may not be following best practices around screening for things like cancer. And so having patients that are more empowered, and people really who are more empowered with their data to be able to help guide those decisions is really going to take off, I think, and using AI and machine learning to really be able to better analyze that data and provide insights is going to be really powerful.
That's great, Jessica. I know another theme, as we were talking about, that came up related to digital health is access, and particularly access in rural areas. We've seen that a lot at Plume. We have truck drivers. We have folks who would, forget safe or affirming care just to access care of any variety. Requires traveling pretty far distances to an endocrinologist who can do hormone therapy. I'm curious from that access lens, kind of examples of how telehealth is supporting folks in places where there's not as many resources as there might be for those of us who are in big cities.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I obviously always think of it kind of through the lens of cancer care, but more broadly, the vast majority of people in this country are seen by community care providers. They are not specialists. For if you're in a rural setting and you go to an oncologist, they are treating every type of cancer that walks through the door. And that's just a specific example of a high level overview of what exists within rural healthcare. That these doctors are not really trained up, to specialize in everything because they're seeing everybody who walks through the door. So while, certainly we still want to be able to support primary care providers, I think it's also a huge opportunity to be able to provide more tailored services that can be remote, that you can have telehealth and telemedicine, that you can bring in more specialized, doctors. You can bring in people with greater cultural competency, or, to some extent, I think that we need to have, everyone says we need culturally competent care. And I'm very much of the mindset that we need to have culturally proactive care, that it needs to be baked into what we're doing from the very beginning. It shouldn't be an afterthought that, we then say, oh, whoops, we need to go back and fix some of this. Like, it's something that we have to be really active about in everything that we do, whether you're, a company like mine that, is kind of agnostic across the industry, or whether you're an LGBT focused company. It's something that everyone has to do because it has to be built into our entire ecosystem if we're going to be able to move things forward.
And Christina, I know another aspect of access is at home, and kind of the work that you do at Peloton, and how Peloton's been really shaped what wellness looks like in the home environment, and wondering if you could speak a little bit to that as well.
Yeah, so I think we saw, pretty strong trends during the pandemic, especially in 2020, of folks wanting to get access to essentially a form of preventative healthcare, right? Fitness and some of those activities in the home, and to be able to do that without the risk of exposure. I think we also saw that it's actually something that's more convenient also, outside of just the safety concerns, to be able to do that in your house. And I think we do see trends now that as the world kind of opens up a little bit more, as the vaccine is becoming more available, that folks are wanting to get access to some of that preventative fitness healthcare kind of outside of the home as well. So we see, I think, the trends kind of moving very strongly and then snapping back as kind of the world changes. I do think what's really important, and like the lesson that I think I take away, is that we want to meet people where they are with the tools to do what they can to help their health. And from the fitness perspective, I think there's Peloton, there have been a bunch of other ways as well for people to get access to that type of, whether it's meditation or whether it's fitness activities, et cetera, to help them and to meet people where they are in the house or outside or traveling, wherever that is, I think is really important.
Yeah, you bring up a great point too around this idea of whole patient care, right? And I think in the industry, when you say holistic care, negative connotation to some people. But in reality, we talk about patients, and when if you have a chronic illness, 20% of what happens to you is in the clinic, but there's still 80% of your life that we can impact, to be able to create changes. And we know that with a lot of the mental health needs of our community, that being able to provide tools and resources that can positively impact your mindset and outlook, can be really valuable. So I love that, Christina.
Jessica, I think that's great. And I think this idea of like that 80%, and like, how do we make sure that folks feel welcomed, not just with like cultural competencies in provider training, but also that they're inclusive faces in that other 80% as well. And I think that's something that I'm really proud of Peloton having done, is you've got folks like our instructors who are out and proud. And I think that's really, really exciting to hopefully help LGBTQ folks feel like this is at least one service that they can use that sees them and validates them and is not discriminatory.
Yeah, seeing people who our like you matters when it comes to fully supportive.
We've talked about a range of specific risks and needs for the LGBTQIA community, cultural competencies, research and reporting. Are there other, specifically as we think about health tech, topics that come to mind that are unique for us as an underserved, underestimated community?
Go ahead. I was just going to, I think that, when it comes to health tech, this less to do with the delivery of care, but the end that we need more of us who are being vocally out about who we are in the health tech space. Like we need more doctors who are like us. We need more entrepreneurs, who are coming into the scene with, great ideas for innovation or working for startups and things like that to be able to make impact. And and it's not always a welcoming crowd, and it can be challenging based on where you are. Geography, I see, and for many who've been to Tennessee, you'll know that it's a different world there than San Francisco. I think that having organizations like Start Out, are great to be able to provide support, and it can be really difficult when you're trying to impact change and you don't feel like you have a seat at the table, when you don't feel like you can be truly your authentic self. And I think that's where it's also our responsibility to lift up other people within our community, to other people don't always support what we're trying.
Yeah. And I think something that we still have to improve also is on the population side. So there is still people, at least what I've seen here in Spain in general, that are not that digital, let's say. So they don't like telehealth or whatever. They think they won't be treated as they should. And that's something that we still have to change here. But yeah, improving during the years.
One thing
I think that's such a
see...
great point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jen.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say one thing that we see coupled with that is based on a lot of negative experiences with healthcare, real mistrust of healthcare systems and of providers, and a real need to reshape that patient experience, to design interventions with, for us, trans and non-binary people at the center, as opposed to the edge case that we're going to work around. And to recognize that for many people, emotionally, this is an incredibly, incredibly big deal. Because of many folks who see us, and right now our scope of care is largely around gender-affirming hormone therapy, don't have a PCP. They're not seeing providers for other medical needs that they have. And so a real recognition of where that mistrust comes from and how it's our responsibility to reshape that experience and rebuild trust back in the system.
Yeah, in general, what we were saying before, like to have a more personalized treatment or whatever, in all terms of personalized meaning. Yeah.
And it is really important here too, right? Like if you've had a bad experience, then like you said, you're going to be less likely to try something new, to go back and to be proactive with your health. You're not going to get you typically would. But I also think that there's a huge perception that patients don't want to know about their health data, and B, that they don't have the capacity or ability to know about their health data or understand it. And in the health tech industry, we like to get really in the weeds with medical jargon and making things really, really complicated. We revolve in our bubbles of acronyms and things like that. And we've really done the community a disservice with this, and overall with the population, that you shouldn't have to go to med school to be able to understand some very basic element of your care. And by empowering people with knowledge types of questions you should be asking when you are meeting with someone for the first time to make sure that this is going to be a good fit, because every provider is not going to be a good fit, and it's okay for you to say no, and it's okay to walk away from that situation. But I think it's also really important that we teach people, and it's our responsibility to teach people about how to be proactive and manage their pathway, because the days of just believing everything a doctor tells you are gone. 50 years ago, everyone said, oh, my doctor told me this, and that's just gospel, and that's what I'm going to go with. And people are questioning more, and we have the internet fingertips, and my God, you can find literally anything you want, whether it's correct or not. So I also think that's where providing scientifically validated resources is important, which also for more research, because we have to be able to provide that data and have that in order to best support the ways that we're educating.
So as we round out the last 15 minutes or so here, one, if there's anyone in the audience who has any questions, feel free to raise them in the chat, and we will take them. And kind of our last series of structured questions are really around advice. So we come from a pretty wide variety of contexts. I imagine our audience does as well. And so would love to hear what advice you'd give to a person looking to improve outcomes for the LGBTQ plus community. And maybe, Christina, you could start based on your experience as an employee, really championing LGBTQ plus inclusion in your work. How would you advise other folks who are looking to do the same?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jess. I think that there's a couple of things that I'd recommend, or like categories of ways that I think somebody can champion LGBTQ plus inclusion in like a corporate environment. I think one is advocating for changes in the product itself. So like, let's say you work on something, it has a sign up flow and there's a gender binary there. You can say something about it. Let's say you see a marketing campaign going out that makes assumptions about what family looks like or relies on certain stereotypes about the community, like, say something, be that internal advocate for ways that your company presents externally. I think the second category of things could be, you could advocate for changes in your work environment. So this would, like, the first category was impacting maybe like users of your product. The second category is about your colleagues and your coworkers. So advocating for changes like parental or adoption leave policies that are inclusive, or for your company's healthcare to fund gender affirming care, or having inclusive bathroom setups in the office. I had a good friend who led the Airbnb LGBTQ ERG, who advocated for having inclusive gender options in employee onboarding. And that also helped them to get better data about pay equality amongst LGBTQ population of employees there. So doing things like putting pronouns in your Slack or email or other places to help normalize that. So again, there's things we can do to help impact inclusivity for the users, also for our coworkers. And then I think, if it's safe and you feel comfortable sharing your identities or work that you do on behalf of the community, you can help leverage your corporations for support as well. So fundraising or volunteering, stuff like that. Helping to be more visible if it's possible to do so, I think can help to start to create culture change and acceptance as well.
That's great. Thank you, Christina. And I know you've done a lot of that. And so thank you for your work on behalf of our community too. Jessica, what advice would you give to founders, and specifically LGBTQ plus founders looking to shape healthcare outcomes?
Yeah. But for founders, I think that the most important thing we can do is be visible. Be visible, be unashamed. It's something that people don't always talk a lot about, especially, when you're an early stage startup and everyone's kind of like, money is green and you need money to grow. But I also think it's really important to pay attention to who's on your cap table. you make sure that you're mission aligned and value aligned with the people that you're working with. It's in reality for me as a founder, it's been a really great filter, because if I bring up the social determinants of health and also happen to say that I'm an LGBT founder, I probably just weeded out a lot of people that I don't want to work with long term. And they will make that very clear. And I'm okay with that, because ultimately for the long-term growth of my company and the type of change that I want to affect in this world and for our community, I don't want to work with people like that. And I think that especially as founders grow, it's also important from a venture capital perspective. There were some great calls earlier today, or sessions earlier, that we're talking around, true equity when it comes to funding LGBT founders. It's hard enough to be a female founder, or but then to add in the additional layer of being an LGBT founder or a trans founder, it makes it so much harder. And being able to have resources and connect with people who are like me, or like people in our community, has been so incredibly valuable, because it can be really isolating at times, and it's hard enough to start something from scratch and build it. So many of us have had to do that with our lives as it is, and overcome that kind of adversity. And I say lean into that. Be unabashedly true to your past and history, because the truth is, all of that matters. I never used to think about telling people I used to be homeless. I would have never said that in a business context. But now that I'm a founder, I realized that, showing my vulnerability and what I've overcome shows grit and determination. And those are the types of things that are really compelling to not only investors, but the people who are believing in your product and what you're building, because, it shows what you're capable of. And there's so many beautiful, accomplished people in our community that deserve to have more visibility and respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jessica.
I think here I mostly agree with Christina and Jessica. They have said most of the things that I would say, like just give visibility. And here in Barcelona, at least, I have to say that it's quite visible. So I've never had a problem to tell anyone on my job or wherever that I'm a LGBTQ person. So, but is what you said, that sometimes you find someone that you are not interested at all of working with them either. And then from the female side, let's say here, there are many initiatives to improve and help a woman to start a startup and create a business and so on. So it's, yeah.
Great. That is also a good segue to some questions from folks in the audience. Nicole is wondering if there's any founders or companies innovating in LGBTQ plus healthcare that we should keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a quick plug for a fellow Rock Health fellow of mine, but that's Ayers, and he has Equality MD, and they are focused on telemedicine for kind of more the overall LGBT population and cultural competencies. I think that that's really valuable, across the board. And I think obviously Plume and a lot, is doing fantastic work. But I also think within our community, there's other needs, that are going to be more specific to, whether you are, gay man, gay woman, and really, being able to tailor those approaches to the individuals. We talked about marketing material and being really sensitive about how we are presenting information. So I mean, that's one company for me that obviously I am a proponent of, and that's fully.
Relatedly, a question from Joseph about organizations kind of in the ecosystem more broadly. And Christine, I know you've mentioned Trevor Project, who you work with, and InReach. Do you want to share any more about what these organizations are doing specifically related to healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on the InReach side, so, and I'll share the link in a bit in the chat. It's an organization where if somebody is really looking for a specific type of healthcare provider, whether that's mental health, or let's say like a clinic near them, or something that's really related to social determinants of health as well. So like thinking about housing and other areas. How would I know, just as a person existing, is the service provider going to be discriminatory to me? Are they going to be pro bono? Are they going to require, let's say, an ID or proof of residence before they serve me? And how would I know without calling 5 providers or showing up to their doorstep whether or not this is an environment that's going to be conducive to me and actually let me get the care that I need? And so this is a platform that folks can come to and um, look up and filter by their very specific use cases and needs. And we have that database because we've got a bunch of volunteers supported by generous donors who actually independently verify thousands and thousands of these services across the US, Canada, and Mexico. So that's kind of how InReach tries to serve the community by connecting folks to those providers that they might need. And we see a lot of usage on that mental health side, especially, but also healthcare providers in general. And then on the Trevor Project, Trevor is a much larger organization, and I'm not speaking on behalf of them. I'm only a volunteer there, but they do a bunch of amazing services around crisis counseling. So if somebody is, in having suicidal ideation some night, they can call into the 24/7 hotline or text chat into the 24/7 text chat services and actually talk to somebody. We'll hold that space for them. Sometimes it's the first time that they've really talked to somebody who is accepting and helps them to kind of find coping skills, maybe brainstorms ways that they can take care of themselves. Trevor also has a bunch of other initiatives like advocacy areas like anti-conversion therapy, which we know can have such a huge impact on somebody's mental health and overall well-being. So Trevor Project has got that direct services side, but also advocacy. And they run on the topic, I think earlier, Jessica and Judy were talking about data and the lack of data. And the Trevor Project runs some of the largest surveys around mental health of LGBTQ folks. And that's a treasure trove of data to really understand what's happening and the trends in the community.
That's great. And Tara Marshall from the audience just shared a link to Joins in Dana. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but there's a resource right there. The other one I can point out that's really specific to the trans community is actually having a conference right now, WPATH, and they have a membership directory really specifically focused on trans health needs. One thing that's exciting, and this will just be like a little plume plug, but we're presenting our first abstract based on a data set of 7,000 trans patients, which is unfortunately one of the largest data sets that exists right now in the country about presenting populations of trans folks in our patient base related to their family support with their care and also related to their fertility desires and interests. And so I do recommend checking out WPATH for a directory specifically about trans healthcare. Great. Well, do anyone have any final thoughts or words they'd like to share? We're at our last minute and a half, but otherwise we will say thank you and close us out.
I'm just grateful to be here, and thank you for the stage and the ability to talk about our stories and what makes us passionate about what we do. And certainly my small plug for my company, Othello Health. If you are an individual or have a family member who suffers from any form of breast or gynecologic cancer, feel free, especially LGBT community, to reach out to us on our website. We are actively looking to bring new people on, especially from marginalized communities that typically would not identify. So would love to have you and hear more about your experience.
It was really great to be here and learn about all what you do and all your thoughts about this topic. So nice to all of you.
Yeah, so awesome to spend this time in conversation with you three and with the audience as well. So thanks for having me, and this is an amazing conversation for us to be able to have.
Well, thank you all so much. Really exciting to learn about what you all are doing. And thank you to Start Out for hosting a really important conversation that we all care a lot about. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your sessions and the rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.